Hey, what's going on, everyone? Christian Hanna Horror here. Just before we get started, I wanted to say happy early Halloween. I was going to release this on Halloween Day, but honestly, I figured, what the hell? Let's just go ahead and get this out. What's the difference? I want you guys to enjoy your Halloween day, be with your friends and family, have a great time. So let's drop this sooner rather than later. So what you're about to see is my Halloween franchise ranking. Now, I want to come at this right from the start and say, what you're about to see may be different from a lot of the rankings you may have seen on the internet. I'm not trolling. This is my honest list, what you're about to see. I am a Nightmare on Elm Street fanatic coming at the Halloween franchise as a big fan of the movies, but I don't claim to be a Halloween fanatic, if that makes sense. I love the franchise. I can quote the movies chapter and verse, but my heart is in Elm Street. So I just kind of want you guys to kind of know that going into this, because this is going to be a fun ranking. This could be a very fun ranking. This could probably be my most controversial ranking I've ever done. But the truth is, I'm just being honest about which movies I love. So I know most Halloween fans are really cool about it, but there are some that might have their knees buckle a little bit seeing this list. But it's all in good fun. So I'll see you guys at the end of this ranking. Sit back, relax, and here is my Halloween franchise ranking, including Halloween Kills. I have Halloween Resurrection at number 12, not necessarily as a spot of shame, but more of a badge of honor. I truthfully didn't want to put it 12 because I think it's a funny movie and I have a fun time watching it, but I couldn't decide which films it would have edged out on this ranking. Halloween Resurrection does a few things right for entertainment value, but unfortunately Mustafa Akkad got in his head that, hey, if LL Cool J could do a good job, so could everybody else. Unfortunately, that wasn't exactly the case. Now, seeing Jamie Lee Curtis die in this movie isn't necessarily something I was against. I was all for seeing a new story with Michael and seeing who he would go after next. I applaud this film for trying something new with the technology aspect, but unfortunately, I just can't overlook Buster Rhymes karate kicking Michael Myers at the end of the film. What a way to disrespect the character. It must be said that this ranking was truly harder than making the Elm Street or the Friday the 13th movies for me. Halloween 2018, I had a hard time figuring out where to put it. There are things I like about this movie a lot, like James Jude Courtney as Michael Myers. I think he's doing a great job and hope to continue seeing him in Halloween Ends. On a negative, it's Michael and Laurie again. We already saw 2 movies back in the day and then a great retcon, in my opinion, back in 1998. What is this, her third timeline with her third different set of kids? Let's do something new for once. My enjoyment of the Rob Zombie Halloween films have certainly garnered my most criticism online from viewers, and I can understand why. You could obviously tell that his first Halloween is the lesser of the 2 films for me. It's notable that Rob certainly garnered a fan base with films like House of 1,000 Corpses and Devil's Rejects with really grisly killers and really overtly vulgar human beings in his films. And I'll certainly meet you guys halfway. The overt vulgarity in the first half of the movie is very jarring, especially for Halloween fans, who might have a different opinion if we showed less of the human backstory of Michael Myers, and more digestible dialogue from the majority of the cast. Some of the things I really love, though, are Scout Taylor Compton as Laurie Strode. I think she did a really good job. Tyler Mane, I think, is a fantastic Myers. I'm a big fan of the brute monster Myers. Danielle Harris is great, and Brad Dourif, of course, is Sheriff Brackett. If anybody had to replace Donald Pleasance as Dr. Loomis, I'm really glad it was Malcolm McDowell. Halloween 5 seems to be another entry that really splits the fan base. Some like it, and some really hate it. I guess me, I do enjoy Halloween 5 quite a lot. I find it pretty funny, and I also like the Nicolas Cage mask he wears in the movie. Probably the biggest note of contention in this film is Tina. Most people think she's annoying in this film, but I just think she has personality, and there's nothing wrong with that. I give a lot of praise to Danielle Harris in this film. What they were asking an adolescent child to do in this film was certainly not easy, and I think that she handled it very well and did a pretty good job. Dr. Loomis is certainly a little bit quirkier in this film, and in my mind I justified it because he's drunk the entire movie. Dr. Loomis got hooked on booze when he rode with the preacher in Part 4, and that's why he's a little weirder in this film. But in all seriousness, I think Halloween 5 is a really fun movie, but if we would have had a little bit more time to flesh out some of the ideas and quite frankly do another take or 2 on some scenes, it would pan out a lot better. Now, it's already seen that Halloween Kills has split the fan base yet again. I find myself in the middle ground, and there is a lot of us that feel that way. One thing I gotta say is I think that this Michael Myers is, again, one of the best performances I've ever seen. Halloween Kills comes higher than Halloween 2018, mostly because we get a lot less Laurie in this film and focus more on the daughter and granddaughter. At least we have new characters to focus on besides her. I'm totally willing to accept that I may be in the minority that think that. I have nothing against Jamie Lee Curtis, I love her, but I just want different characters in these movies. To be honest with you, I really wanted to have this film higher on my list because of James Jude Courtney specifically. I think he's one of the best Myers in the franchise. But unfortunately, I do have a hard time overlooking the bad dialogue and script writing in this. If this is an inside joke with David Gordon Green to make the audience feel silly, well, he definitely succeeded. Had this film had less than a baker's dozen Boogeyman references and way less Evil Dies Tonight chants, this film certainly would have been a little bit higher on my list. But unfortunately, there's enough of those to go around, and then some, and then more. Maybe my sweatshirt gave it away, but yes, I am a big fan of Halloween H2O. The truth is, after Halloween 2018 came out, I decided to revisit H2O and reassess the film on its own merit. One thing I found myself walking away with was my absolute love for Jamie Lee Curtis's performance in this role. Now, I don't want it to come across as this is my favorite reboot by default because it was the first one to do it. The truth is, after seeing this movie again, I feel like instead of playing a character like Laurie Strode, Jamie Lee Curtis brings her own self to the role to give a real sense of realism to the PTSD somebody would feel after going through what they did in 1978. While Jamie Lloyd, I guess, is my favorite kid from Laurie Strode, I think Josh Hartnett in this film does a really great job and balances off of Jamie Lee Curtis very well in this movie. Of all the late 90s horror films that were inspired from Scream, I do think that this is one of my favorite ones. I like the town of Haddonfield as much as the next guy, but whenever I binge these movies and I get to H2O, I'm always happy to see a fresh location for a film like this in California where they have the private school. I guess at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, with all the reboots of Halloween, H2O is my favorite one. It's got my favorite performance of Laurie Strode from Jamie Lee Curtis, who's trying to live her best life but struggles having the memory of Michael Myers. She's not making booby traps in her basement or shooting shotguns all day in her backyard, but when it comes time to do the work, she chops this bastard's head off. What an ending to the movie. I thought about separating the producer's and theatrical cut of Halloween: The Curse of Michael Myers, but when I was making my list, I found that they sat right next to each other in the ranking. I think the key elements of what I love about this film are in both cuts of the movie, so that's why they're right next to each other. Halloween 6 has the most autumn feel out of any of the movies to me. I could put this movie on in March and it feels like Halloween outside to me. I guess I'll go with the producer's cut as my preferred version of the two films, but this film was always like the Freddy's Revenge of the series to me. It was always the darkest chapter in this entire franchise, and I love it because of that. The cult aspect is something I was always fascinated about. I might be in the minority on this, but if you are going to explain why Michael Myers is this killing machine, telling me he's under the spell of a cult is probably the scariest thing I could conjure up in my mind. Not only do you have to worry about Michael Myers now, but this mysterious cult that's controlling him. Wow, I love this movie for these dark elements that it has. It also should be noted that I think George P. Wilbur is among the best of the Michael Myers. This man is a tour de force, and I love him portraying the character. Again, I'm a big fan of the brute Big Myers. And I guess if I was going to go up against any of these, George P. Wilbur would probably be the last one I'd want to face against. He's a beast. Dr. Loomis in this movie is also something I find myself really loving. He's an older man in this film, and I think this was Donald's last movie. But the cadence of Dr. Loomis is a little bit slower. You got to really focus when he's talking. But he's got so much knowledge in this film about Michael Myers and what power he has. And I think he has some really great lines in here, especially when he goes to the Myers house and he's telling John's wife about his rage, his memories. Halloween 6 is not a perfect film by any stretch, but when I watch this film, it feels more like Halloween than anything else to me, and that goes a long way for me. I love this movie. When it comes to Halloween 4, I think it's probably one of the best examples of blending spooky atmosphere and nice suspense with also being a great 80s slasher film with some cool gore. Dwight H. Little was probably the best choice for director for this movie and really got the franchise back on track for big Myers fanatics. He did a great job. Part 4 probably has my favorite portrayal of the character of Michael Myers from George P. Wilbur yet again, and I know I'm not alone on that because Mustafa Akkad wanted to get him back for Part 6. I think he's great. One of my favorite performances of the film is Bo Starr playing Sheriff Meeker. I always love that Sheriff Meeker in the film takes his job very seriously, but he's very aware of what happened in 1978 in Haddonfield. So when Dr. Loomis shows up saying Michael's back, he's tempered, but doesn't discredit what he's saying and takes it very seriously. I like to think that he saved lives that night. It also can't be overstated just how good Danielle Harris is in Part 4. Mind you, this is a child, and when you look at the series as a whole, I'd argue she's a better performer than half the people in these movies. While I still think Halloween 6 has the most autumn feel out of any of them, Part 4 comes damn close, and that goes a long way with me. It's no doubt that the biggest surprise in this list so far is probably Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, clocking in at number 4. But if you hear me out, I'd like to explain my case on this. The reluctancy of Rob Zombie to return to this series after his first Halloween movie is ultimately what made this movie become one of my favorites. Rob Zombie took the chains off and said, I'm not going to do what I probably should do, but what I want to do. Exploring the after effects of traumatic experiences is something I always like seeing in horror movies. It's no doubt that Rob Zombie was asking a lot from Scout Taylor Compton in this film, and boy oh boy does she deliver. Trauma doesn't just affect us, but the people around us. And seeing Annie in this film portrayed by Danielle Harris was painful because the scars remind her every day of the terror of that one fateful Halloween night between the two. The back and forth between them seems very realistic and just really gut-wrenching and hard to watch. You want the best for these two girls as much as you can. One of my favorite things Rob also did in Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 was taking the Dr. Loomis character and going left when maybe people thought he would go right. Dr. Loomis takes this traumatic experience that everybody went through, especially Laurie, and tries to profit off of it. We may know a couple doctors that would think that's the right thing to do, don't we? Now I hear your voices out there. Rob Zombie uses his wife in everything. And I get it, maybe overuse. But Halloween 2, at least he gave her something different to do instead of just parade around looking good. I always thought that the dark dream sequences and imagery in this film aided in the visual breakdown of what Laurie Strode was going through. I also think it helped differentiate itself from not only the rest of the series, but Rob's own first Halloween remake, which was a bit of a hodgepodge. Now, if I could ask you, the viewer, of only one thing, it would be to watch this film again and watch the breakdown of Sheriff Brackett when he sees his daughter's death in the house. It is by far and away the most gut-wrenching, painful, and most amazing performance in the entire franchise to me from Brad Dourif. It pulls on my heartstrings and I get goosebumps every time I see it. I don't want to come across jaded and think I'm going to make anybody a new Halloween 2 fan from this video, but I do think we can all agree that Brad Dourif is probably one of the greatest actors in the world of horror today and back then, and this movie solidifies that. I also can't overstate how much I love the hospital sequence in Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. I find this scene better than probably anything in his first Halloween movie. It's tense, dark, gritty, not to mention it's shot on beautiful 16mm film, and I really appreciate Rob doing that. I love this movie. I mean, Halloween 2, 1981, how do you not love it? This is a side thing to say, but I always thought that Halloween 2 had the best poster of the franchise. I always loved that skull pumpkin. Making a sequel take place literally the second after the previous movie ended seems almost kind of risky to do, but Halloween 2 probably did it better than any other sequel I can think of. It feels the same, but then it doesn't. I always liked that Halloween 2 had a more sinister, darker feel while still being in the same kinship of the first film. Aided by that score from Alan Howarth probably helped a lot. I do really love where the story goes with Halloween 2. When the nurse tells Dr. Loomis that Michael Myers is the brother of Laurie Strode, I'll never forget the oh my god moment the first time I watched it. It also can't be overstated that Halloween 2 just has some of the most memorable scenes, and some of the dialogue that sticks with us is so funny. You want mayonnaise on your sandwich? How about mustard? I understand that John felt the pressure to make this movie a little bit gory because of the way horror was changing in the 80s. And I gotta be honest, I just like that. I know that the theater of the mind is a great tool, and it can be used in great movies like Halloween and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but hell, man, I love me some 80s gore. And I think that this movie tempered it so well with suspense, and Dick Warlock is the shape. He is one of the best. Obviously, I can't ignore the elephant in the room. The original Halloween is not my number one, but let's just make things clear right from the start. If you ask me, is Halloween the greatest horror movie ever, I would probably tell you yes. If you ask me, is it my favorite Halloween movie, I'd have a different answer. I give a lot of credit, though, to this movie's success because of the score. It's definitely my favorite element from this movie, and probably my favorite thing John Carpenter's ever done. Every Halloween score that came after this in the Michael Myers lineage comes close, but never gets to the point of being as good as that original soundtrack. I've always wanted to own this movie on vinyl from the original pressing. I love the art, especially because it has a darker tone to it. This isn't a faded, weird shaded image you're seeing. This is actually what the original pressing looks like. I won't waste too much more time on Halloween. Just think of all the things everybody says about why it's so great, and no, I agree with it. Let's get to the number one. For those of you that know me, this isn't a surprise already. My love for Halloween 3 is well documented. This is probably one of the most punk rock movies I've ever seen, and I am in fact a punk rocker. Sometimes I'm baffled with joy at the fact that a movie like this exists. You've got a Celtic cult factory owner that wants to put Halloween masks on kids across the country on Halloween night and blow their heads off and turn them into snakes, bugs, and critters. What the hell? This is awesome. A lot of John Carpenter fans can pretty much agree that Tom Atkins is one of the greatest anti-heroes ever, and whether you love or hate this movie, it's really hard to dislike Tom. His pursuit of truth on trying to find out what's going on with these silver shamrock masks while still trying to get laid by a good-looking Stacey Nelkin, well, that's something I can just get behind. But on a serious note, guys, the soundtrack to Halloween 3 is far and away my favorite horror soundtrack ever. Talk about a synth masterpiece. Songs like South Corridor and Chariots or Pumpkins are songs that set tension and mood from the first hit of the keyboard. I'll never forget seeing Mr. Grimbridge running down the California streets late at night when that Chariots of Pumpkins song hits. I was like, I don't know what this is, but this is some of the spookiest stuff I've ever seen. What a soundtrack. Dan O'Hurley is probably one of the greatest villains in a horror movie in my opinion. His speech about bringing Halloween back to its sacrificial roots is probably one of the best horror monologues I can ever recall seeing in a movie. There was a sense of realism too because he is an Irish guy. And you know what, I'm actually Irish too, so maybe there's a little bit of kinship with this movie there as well. I just love at the part where he goes, and the hills ran red with the blood of animals and children. Just great stuff. I get goosebumps every time. That's one of the big reasons I love this movie. Without Dan O'Hurley, I don't know if this movie would be as good as it is. He's a very big reason of why I love it. I'm always changing horror posters in my horror room, but one that always stays is my Halloween 3. It's actually an original rolled poster, so it's got no creases in it. My wife got it for me years ago. Thank you. I also love the masks. This movie is just everything to me. I'm also willing to accept that there's part of an X factor that I'm really not good at explaining as to why I love it so much, but I think you kind of get the idea. I hope you guys pick up the 4K Blu-ray of this movie too from Scream Factory. The movie's never looked better, and of all the art on those releases, I give it to Halloween 3 for having the best art. I love that movie. So guys, there is my ranking of the Halloween franchise. Wild, I know, but my heart tells me which movies I love at the end of the day, and I know that it's the same with you. So, happy early Halloween, guys. Thank you for watching this ranking, and I ask you, please, honestly, what is your all-time favorite Halloween movie, and why? Thank you for watching this video, and we'll see you guys very, very soon.